Hej allihopa och välkomna till dagens webbinar som ska handla om social hållbarhet under det som vi kallar då för CommToAct People. Jag heter Karin Gråman och jag är verksamhetsansvarig för initiativet CommToAct som säkert många känner till, hoppas jag. Det drivs av 6 stycken bransch- och intresseorganisationer som ni ser här i botten. Och vi har också såklart globala samarbeten som idag så har vi bjudit in Kantar som ni kanske har sett också. Lite inledande så kommer vi spela in det här webbinariet så att fler kan lyssna på det i efterhand. Om ni har kollegor så dela gärna länken i efterhand. Vi kommer lägga upp det på hemsidan comtoact.se. Innan vi drar igång så ska jag bara lite kort berätta vad vi fokuserar på inom people-delen. Jättekul att så många lyssnar in. Ja, så första området är då det här med hälsa och friskfaktorer där vi då tittar på hur vi mår i branschen och där vi kikar på rapporter men också guider och vägledning för hur man kan jobba med det här. Det hittar ni på hemsidan. Och den andra delen är ju då det här som vi ska prata om idag, inkludering. Vi vet ju att genom att skapa en inkluderande miljö, både arbetsmiljö men också inkluderande kommunikation som vi ska lyssna på lite mer idag, så ökar affärsnyttan och vi får en högre trovärdighet inom branschen. Vi lockar till oss bättre talanger. Ja, det finns massor med fördelar med att jobba med de här frågorna. Och även här så har vi ju tagit fram både rapporter och vägledande material som finns att hitta då på comtoact.se. Och om ni är nyfikna på att engagera er i några av de här frågorna så får ni gärna höra av er till mig efteråt. karin.gråman@comtoact.se. Och allt som händer kan ni också hitta på våra LinkedIn som jag hoppas att ni följer eller börjar följa. Så det var min korta inledning. Men nu ska jag växla över till engelska och släppa in våran gäst som kommer hela vägen från USA. So we are so delighted to have Valeria Paleggio. Did I pronounce that right?
You did. Thank you.
Very welcome. So we are so much looking forward to have you here and listen to your findings from this report, Brand Inclusion Index, and how we maybe can adopt some of those to our country as well.
That is fantastic. And thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry about the interruption. You can tell my Swedish is limited. I took Kantar as an invitation to share my content. Thank you for having me. It is more important than ever that we have data on the importance of inclusion and inclusion for brand growth, and that we listen to what consumers around the world are demanding brands today. So I'll share with you the findings of our study. I do have to caveat that this is a global study, included 18 countries, 5 regions, 11 languages, over 20,000 respondents, but it was not done in the Nordic countries. So I'm going to show you some of the findings from Europe so you can feel closer to the content. But I do encourage that you think about what would be the local applications and how can we better understand and listen to consumers who are often not even part of our research. So one of the things we did very differently with this study is reach out to underrepresented groups in research, because we couldn't talk about inclusion without including those voices that are so often unheard. So I do welcome your questions if you want to post them in the chat. We will address them either today, if we have the time, or we will follow up with you. My contact information is also at the end of the presentation, and I have a QR code to download the booklet that is complimentary to you if you want to have something in writing. So, Karin, is it okay now for me to share?
Yeah, go ahead and share your presentation. Now it's
all right.
The right time.
Thank you.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
All right. And hopefully you do see my screen now and my presentation on your screens. This is an accessible presentation. You can also use captions if my English has too much accent for you, as a way to have better access to the content. So the theme for our brand inclusion index is inclusion as the source of future brand growth, because you're going to hear me saying once and many times again that that is the source for brands to grow, to persuade more people, to engage them in ways that are culturally relevant. But because today diversity, equity, and inclusion is being challenged in many parts of the world, I'm going to start with a business case about why inclusion is the source for growth. And then I'm going to show you the findings from the Brand Inclusion Index that are global. So chances are very applicable to where you are. We're also going to celebrate the brands that are awarded as the most inclusive around the world, with some geographical highlights for Europe. And then we're going to talk about what are the next steps in your brand inclusion journey. What can you do? And as I said at the beginning, please do post your questions to follow up and make this more relevant to you. So what is the business case for inclusive marketing? One is the notion that is not about reaching out to niche or to minorities. It is expansive marketing. And this is because at Kantar we know that brands grow by persuading more people, being more present and more salient. And that is what inclusion does for your brand. We also know that because of demographic changes around the world, it is these high growth markets that are going to deliver growth, especially in mature sectors, in areas where you don't see much movement. Well, that will come from these underserved populations that are growing in buying power, in cultural influence, in also population size. So we need to adjust. This is the inclusivity imperative for businesses. Brands must develop a more inclusive approach in their strategy, in their communications, and in their internal culture. And this is just first to maintain that cultural relevance, but also to think about future growth. And these populations are present in every market. Part of the Brand Inclusion Index was identifying what are those pockets of growth in each country. In some cases, in a category, it might be women and their high growth in terms of buying power. In other markets, it might be the people with disabilities market that is substantial and often inadequately served. It might be people who are international migrants and are generating wealth as well, or it might be the LGBTQ plus community. It's a matter of identifying who are we missing in our strategy that can deliver growth to our brand. So as I mentioned, we went into doing this research with an eye to making sure we were representing the underrepresented. And the findings were quite telling. These are the key ones that you cannot miss. And the first one is to debunk the myth that inclusion marketing is about marketing to a minority. And you're not going to hear that word in my vocabulary because, again, this is about thinking, how can we expand and engage and persuade more people? And we know that there are vast proportions of the population that are underserved, sometimes misunderstood and misrepresented. And for these groups, the expectation is for brands to speak their language, to represent them with local talent, to tell stories that matter to them, which is basic cultural intelligence. Yet we are finding that many global brands still rely on archaic ethnocentric approaches. So there is time, a call to action to evolve representation and to embrace diversity and inclusion. And this is because there's a universal truth. Almost 8 in 10 people worldwide are telling us that diversity and inclusion is important in their personal lives. And most importantly, this is how they approach everything in their life, including the brands they buy from. It's also not just about developed markets. We tend to think that DI and inclusion matters in developed markets, where people have their basic needs met and therefore can aspire to more altruistic pursuits. And what we discovered in this research is that fairness, representation, inclusion, these are essential for emerging economies and for underrepresented people who have basic needs often unmet. Needs of feeling safe, feeling welcomed, the need for belonging, feeling respected, the need for self-esteem, or these are very, very basic needs. Let's move to the next slide and the next insight, which is this importance of diversity and inclusion in personal life translates in how people decide what brands to buy from. And it shapes the purchasing decisions, especially of younger populations. We found that Gen Zers and millennials worldwide, as well as key underserved populations like people with thinking and learning differences, so the neurodivergent, LGBTQ+, and people with disabilities. For these populations, there is a disproportional influence of diversity and inclusion in the decisions they make when buying. Here you have a chart with the data. You see that is the global average at the center. Around 75% of people agree that it's important to them to buy from brands that make diversity and inclusion part of their business and that also promote it in society as a whole. But as you can see, the populations I just named over-index. And for these populations, it is even more important. The other finding is less positive. And it's a call for businesses to reflect on their practices, because we found that experiences of discrimination are really prevalent in many places around the world. The global average is 46% of people who have experienced discrimination in the last year, but it goes up to 70% plus in many African countries like South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria. Luckily for you in Europe, that is where you see the lowest proportion of discrimination. Yet, 3 in 10 people, around 33% of people, still experience discrimination. So it is important that we tackle where is this happening and what can businesses do about it. And the other learning we had was that discrimination tends to happen in business settings. It is happening where people work, where people shop, where people seek services. So it is important that businesses take discrimination as a business issue, not just a social issue, and make the determination of closing these inclusion gaps. Overall, we found that 6 in 10 people experienced discrimination of those who had experiences of discrimination in a business location, and that there are certain populations that are even more marginalized, and those are people who are neurodivergent and the LGBTQ plus consumer. So those are populations that we need to be especially attentive to. The fourth finding is that we need to keep working in terms of inclusive representation. Overall, the advertising and marketing industry has made strides. At Kantar, we're part of the Stereotype Alliance. This is convened by UN Women, and we have seen good progress year after year in terms of gender representation, and lately on other dimensions of representation, such as race and ethnicity or body positivity. However, our findings show that there's still a lot of work to be done. While there's a majority of people who say that brands are making an effort to be more representative and to be more diverse, more inclusive, this is not happening everywhere in the world. We have cases like the Czech Republic or Japan, where you see a lot less positive arguments towards brands. So overall, we do need to keep working to close these inclusion gaps. And you see that there are certain populations that, again, tend to be excluded. This is the case for people who have intersectional identities. This means that they belong to several groups that tend to be underrepresented. Here you have an example of a person in the UK who is 50 plus, LGBTQ plus, has a disability, and is a transgender. So this person is saying, they have never seen a transgender person or a disabled person in mainstream advertising. So there are certainly people who are just seeking visibility. And that is, in many cases, what is at stake. We have other voices. This is from the Netherlands. Again, you see these groups, the people with disability, LGBTQ plus, and this is across age groups. So thinking about, who are you missing in terms of your brand representation and how you can tell a better story. Because the other thing to take into account is not just having diversity as a token. One of the stories that I'm going to emphasize later on has to do on how do we tell those stories? How do we make sure that diversity is not just a collage, but is an intrinsic part of the brand story? I'm leaving these quotes a little bit on the screen for you to read them. I don't want to, give my voice to people who might sound very different from myself, certainly. We have here another one. This is Germany. You see here, again, the representation of seniors. That was a very important theme in Europe, how people 50 plus are being represented, and the fact that in many cases, even people as young as 40 don't see themselves positively represented in brand stories, or what they see does not reflect how they feel about themselves and their age. So to contrast the voices that we were hearing with what we see in actual advertising, at Kantar we have a way of analyzing advertising. We have a link database with advertisements from all around the world. And what we confirmed is that there's a lack of positive representation in advertising globally today. To give you an example, only 5% of global advertising show women in aspirational roles. We thought that was a battle we had conquered, and yet we have so much to do to this respect. And you can see here all the other statistics about, for example, the representation of skin tone and ethnic representation. We still have colorism present in advertising. And so many ethnicities are sometimes misrepresented by, images that are not localized. So we have to think about not just visibility, but also what is the role of that diversity in advertising. The other thing we did in this study is capture the voices, the words of people and how they talk about representation, how they want brands to show them and speak about them. And we used our very innovative text AI tools. Likely we have AI, and sometimes AI is used to repeat stereotypes, right? Because AI is usually based on data that is already out there. In this case, we used AI for good and to amplify the voices of those who tend to be unheard. And the messages were very, very clear about what people want. First, people are very tired of aspirational beauty. They want realistic representations. They want people to show diverse skin tones and body sizes and hair textures. We heard very loud and clear that perfection is not what they want to see and certainly is out of trends. Brands are advised to prioritize body inclusivity and age inclusivity. In fact, ageism was one of the biggest issues and should be challenged. As I mentioned, people as young as 40 are demanding visibility and respect. And while diversity is certainly welcomed, there is a counter trend, and it's people don't want to see diversity just for the sake of it. They want it to be natural rather than forced. They want to feel it's an intrinsic part of the brand story. It's part of what the brand does and not what the brand shows. So to achieve this, brands should focus on authenticity, making sure that it's genuine representation, both in front and behind the camera. That is how you avoid that tokenization. We also heard in emerging markets, especially in Africa, that brands should prioritize local representation. They do not want to see themselves represented, and they can tell the difference between talent from different countries. And this also includes languages, including dialects and accents within each country, as well as avoiding colorism, as I mentioned. In many cases, we see very light skin tones and not deep tones and hues. We also heard about marginalized communities having a need for representation in brand communications, especially from First Nations or indigenous populations. So I'm going to let you listen to these voices so you can get a sense of the call out for brands to be more representative. These are real verbatims, by the way. So hope you enjoy.
It would be nice to show acceptance of people with different sexual identities and foreigners.
Use more local content and locals in creating your advert.
Black is beautiful.
Show women who look normal, with no makeup, not slim and not photoshopped. I never see people like you and me in advertising. I think that's a real shame and definitely not in keeping with the times.
There are not only two genders, and not all gender fluid people present androgynous.
Less filters and more reality.
As someone with Indigenous heritage, I find it off-putting that the only advertisements with Indigenous people in them are with fully Indigenous outfits and not normal clothes. Most of us wear normal clothes.
And this takes us to our last finding. And this is all about thinking about the future and what inclusion can do to grow your brand. Improving, the experience of employees and consumers, and especially in emerging markets and with high growth yet under or misrepresented populations, think about, what can we do to better represent and engage them? And this chart here synthesizes various data that we have in our study. And I know it's a little bit difficult to interpret. It's a fine chart that paints the picture of what are the roots of the inclusivity imperative. You see on the left side that experiences of discrimination are often the root of this demand for brands to be more inclusive. We find that as discrimination is more prevalent, the importance of diversity and inclusion is even higher in people's lives and shapes their purchasing decision. You actually see there the gap between intention and action, intention being the values that people hold, and action being that desire to purchase from brands that are inclusive. And this is an explanation that, as I said before, goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If people's sense of safety and security and belonging, or esteem for that matter, are not met, well, they will try to solve for these needs. Sometimes they do it loudly, and in some other cases, more quietly. This depends on the culture and the sense of empowerment. But brands should not wait to be called out for their bias or for their exclusive or discriminatory practices. Brands should be clear and determined champions of inclusion, especially today when things are a little bit more challenging. And what we just saw by country, I'm now showing it to you at an individual or personal level. And you see that the same relationship applies. For instance, for people who are gender non-conforming, experiences of discrimination are almost universal. And so is the equal proportion that says that DEI is important to them. So as you can see, this is a very basic need that brands should take into account. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we're in the presence of a generational shift that is shaping the culture and is shaping what young consumers expect from brands. In this chart, you have not just the intention to buy, but how that happens as a constant for people. So those who are saying, I look for brands that are inclusive, not just occasionally, but constantly. And as you can see, that is not a constant for maybe boomers or even Gen X consumers. However, when we look at millennials and Gen Zers, it is for the almost, majority of consumers. So as we think about the future in terms of what will deliver brand growth, think about this as a guidance to grow your brand. And I do love this verbatim from a US respondent, and I think it synthesizes the call to action today. Today is a challenging time. It's a difficult time to do anything, but not a time to do nothing. And certainly is, my call to action today. So moving on, I want to celebrate with your help the brands that were awarded the most inclusive around the world. There's a lot we can learn from these brands based on why people were giving the award to this brand. And again, we analyzed those insights and we identified what are the common threats. And I have to say, one of the brands that took the stage, certainly as the most inclusive global brand, was Google. It is globally and in some countries chosen both prompted and unprompted. We tried both ways to see what was a better response. And Google came across also as #1 in India. So let's listen to why people awarded Google as most inclusive.
Google's technology and innovation is very customer friendly and responsive. So they take the matter of inclusivity and diversity very seriously, and it reflects in almost all products that they launch.
Because they are widely recognized for their technological innovations, these brands have demonstrated an unwavering commitment to portraying diverse consumers authentically and inspiring the industry to celebrate the true identities of all customers.
Because it is accessible to all.
Google stands out for its commitment to diversity and inclusion across its workforce, products, and services. The company not only champions diversity within its own ranks, but also actively supports marginalized communities through various initiatives, partnerships, and programs. Google consistently demonstrates a genuine dedication to fostering an inclusive environment where everyone feels valued and respected, making it a deserving recipient of the award for Best Brand in Diversity and Inclusion.
It offers a variety of options to enhance different activities, generate income, advertise, make videos online, and make them viral. Constantly increases the capacity of your resources to make life easier and without any discrimination.
For the inclusion and diversity of its workers and developers.
Every Google product ad I've seen was always representing a different ethnicity, culture, disability, and more.
As you can hear in these comments, only one mentioned advertising. So it is important we understand that inclusion, brand inclusion goes deep into the organization, deep into the products and the accessibility that the company and the brand provide. And as you're going to hear in our next case study, it also has to do with the culture it creates and who they hire. The next brand to celebrate is Dove. Dove was chosen in many countries as the most inclusive, but it was also chosen as the most inclusive brand for women. In this case, it does have to do more with storytelling, although a lot of people did mention product innovation that addresses the skin and cosmetic needs of diverse populations, but it had a lot to do with being there consistently, being a brand that positively represents women of all backgrounds, and that includes body and race and ethnicity, and being an advocate for self-esteem and for body positivity and issues that matter to people today. I'm going to show you now the country winners. You're going to see that in many cases, these are brands that are local brands, which emphasizes that need for cultural nuance to demonstrate a cultural intelligence about what drives inclusion for local brands. So here you have them. In Japan, it's Uniqlo. In South Korea, Samsung. In India, it's Google. In Kenya, Safaricom. In South Africa, it's Nike. In Nigeria, MTN. In the Czech Republic, Zalando. And then in Europe, Germany, Italy, France, and Spain, they all chose Amazon. So I will speak about Amazon in a little bit. In the UK and in the Netherlands, Dove. In Canada, Dove again. In the US, Amazon again. In Mexico, Coca-Cola. In Colombia, Adidas. And in Brazil, Natura. So as you can see, the clear winner in Europe is Amazon. And I have to say, Amazon won also in the US 2 years in a row. I mentioned that the Brand Inclusion Index is a pioneer study. It's the first time we do it globally, but we did a beta study in the UK and the US prior, and Amazon was the winner as well. So you might be wondering why. There are so many different reasons for it. You have here people in the UK, they all represent the LGBTQ plus community, and they mention different aspects. It has to do with a notion of fairness that transcends not just who they hire and how they treat their people, They're seen as a company that provides opportunities for diverse communities, but also how they treat their own customers. So, for example, their customer return policy. You see here some of the responses from Germany, and you see references to advertising, but also references to how the company vouches for people, both employees and customers, as well as the opportunities it gives to people of all backgrounds, even those who have very few opportunities coming at them. And here are the opinions from France in terms of, again, how the company provides opportunities for minorities. So in many cases, both Amazon and Google are seen as companies who level the playing field, that provide access to opportunities for those who, in many cases, don't have them. And we have here some more verbatims in terms of, again, representation. And in terms of representation, avoiding colorism as well as body positivity come across as very relevant. So this takes me to the end of today's session. I'm going to emphasize, the need to think about inclusion as a source for brand growth, thinking about how you can better represent and engage with high growth, yet underserved segments of people within your category, within your brand. And with the Brand Inclusion Index, actually, we can track that. We can identify how the brand does with various populations, with various segments, to identify who are you leaving behind? Who do you need to include to be more relevant? And that means include not just in advertising, but also within your organization to better serve consumers, and within, also your content development. The idea here is to think about the brand in a holistic way, thinking about the company itself and the values that it needs to express, and then how it is manifested in everything the organization does in terms of product innovation that grants access and inclusion, in terms of retail design and distribution, making sure that you're reaching all areas of the communities you serve, both online and in real life, as well as customer service that services everyone equally and acknowledges customers' unique needs. And after you have done all that, think about how are you telling those stories through brand communications that generate a sense of welcome to people of all walks of life. So with that, I'm going to leave you my contact information in case you want to post questions after this webinar. That's my role. I lead inclusive growth at Kantar, and I'm part of the sustainable transformation practice. And I'm also going to share with you a QR code for those who want to download our complimentary booklet where we share some of these findings for later consumption.
Thank you so much for this, Valeria. It is so interesting. And as always, it's so much more inspirational to see a case and how you can actually have some, hopefully at least some inspiration of how you can do this yourself. Thank you so much.